Hello and welcome to the Lean and Agile show. I'm your host Shaheen, and today I have a dear friend of mine, Craeg. He is coming us all the way from New York, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
How are you doing, Craeg?
Thanks. Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for accepting. I know you are a very busy man. Thanks for accepting and coming to the show. So let's just start from understanding or telling us who Craeg is. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I am the CTO of a small company, Aerial Partners, and it's based in Times Square. It's always fun and exciting there. And it is an IT company, but we do a lot of training, and certainly specializing in Kanban and in a lot of sort of Kanban related disciplines. And as for me, how it all began, I went to school at MIT, stayed around in Boston for a while, and then eventually moved to through a series of improbable events, eventually moved to New York City and started a company. And so I'm a co-founder of the company. And what's interesting is I work a lot with federal government agencies and also municipal government, in addition to commercial companies. And so that's interesting. A lot of different, very, very different environments to introduce Kanban into. And also we've been doing public training. So I've been doing public training courses like I just did today since 2016. Last few things, I speak at a lot of conferences on Agile, DevOps, that kind of thing. And one cool thing is once a year, we have this new, it's becoming a tradition where once a year we invite a sort of a luminary or well-known person in the Agile community to teach a master class in New York City. So we're holding one very soon with Klaus Leopold with Flight Levels, end of June here in New York City. And we're now just starting to plan, like, who should that person be for next year? So it's kind of fun.
Right.
So
lots of interesting questions to ask you, Craeg. I hope we get to have enough time.
Sure.
So tell us, I'm going to ask you about starting your company and how this, when you, and was it at the time that you co-found the company, the Kanban was your go-to method, or like after you started tell us about the history of your company and Kanban and how they go hand in hand.
Actually, yeah, that is a very good question, because back in 1999, I was doing, building software. I think at the time it was still Fidelity Investments in Boston, right, something like that. And a book came out, and I just picked it up. And that's back when we had physical bookstores. You'd go and browse stuff like, oh, this brand new book. This is cool. What is this? And it said Extreme Programming Explained. I said, what is this extreme thing? So I read it, and it was like a lightning bolt went through me. I said, man, this is something new. This is something cool, and I need to learn about this. So very soon after that, I started my first extreme programming project, and got a chance to use extreme programming at customers. But essentially, after that, it became a series of, trying out different Agile practices. And it was not too long after that I discovered David Anderson. And so I basically followed David Anderson through his evolution, literally on the road to Kanban and getting to Kanban. So the first book I read seriously cover to cover was Agile Management, and I loved that book. I was like, man, this is great. This is how I think. So at the time where I was on a big project, and we actually invited him. When was this? I want to say 2005, 2006, something like that. And we invited, it's pre-Kanban, and
Right.
invited him to speak about feature-driven development
Oh, wow.
in New York City on a ginormous project we had. We had something like 150 developers. And so I was a project manager at the time, development manager. And I said, so I still loved extreme programming, but I said, what can scale up to 150 people? So
Right.
the only thing I could see at the time was feature-driven development.
Mhm.
And by God, it worked.
Right.
It really worked. So, but I remember we had him come and speak, and that was a real highlight. So so after that, I just followed him, and as he went to Kanban, I followed.
Mhm.
So that's so this company was founded in 2010,
Mhm.
and very soon after that, you know, started getting into Kanban and things like that. So it was after 2010, but not too much later after that.
Right. Right. Good. Good. So the book that you mentioned, the Agile Man, is one of those hidden gems that if
Yes.
because typically you go and talk about the Kanban Blue Book in the training that we do and
Yes.
all that, right? But this is one thing that if someone finds time, I recommend it highly as well. So you were the person that see David Anderson evolve through time as well, or his journey. So
Yeah.
what are the things that you saw through his journey, or your with your journey and himself, that you can share with us, that is interesting for us and maybe insightful for our audience?
Well, it's interesting because you know how they say the new convert is, very, very what's the word? Anyone who's a new convert to something, like they're really, really into it. And
Right.
so I was basically that. I was the converted. I read Agile Management. I said, man, this is really something. So David was moving on, and
Right.
basically he wrote a book and he said, you know what? I, I don't want to say it wrongly, but it's something to the effect of, I've tried so long to see if people can change and say, oh, there's so much of a better way of doing things. And, this radical change. And people are resisting. They have all this emotional resistance. So, you know what? I'm not going to do it anymore. So instead, I'm going to adopt this evolutionary style. And I resisted for a while. I was like, wait, no, David, don't give up so soon. You have something great. This is amazing. How could you do this? So I and but gradually I saw the truth of it. So it took,
Mm,
it was so interesting, right? Because gradually I saw, yeah, that's and I think it really solidified when on an FBI project. So it's a
mhm,
really interesting story. So we actually, at the time, it was still very, very controversial and almost, it was basically it was the second project to go agile. Like,
mhm,
yeah, number two, that's it, of all the hundreds of projects. So at the time, there was still, and people could argue whether it's still the case, but at the time, people, when they saw the word agile, the only thing in their mind is Scrum,
mhm.
right?
Right.
So, so I thought, okay, well, I want to do something new. I want to go agile, but, politically, realistically, we have to do Scrum. So fine, fine. I, I'm of the mind, never make the perfect the enemy of the good, right?
Right.
Never. So is Scrum going to be way better than what they have today? Absolutely. So let's do it. But what's interesting is, and we adopted it and we had success, but we started to run into some challenges. And then I went back to David's book
Right.
and back to that. And I said, wait a minute, we can do this and that might be helpful. Wait, we can do that and it might be helpful. Oh, and this other thing. And so one by one, we started
Right.
adopting these methods. And then I saw the truth of it. It's like, yes, that it basically was incremental change. And it
Right.
really worked. So I said, okay. And that's when I said, I gotta, took a master class and started
Right.
doing all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. I don't remember who said it, but there's one of these great Kanban person. I should find out. I think their website is huge. I don't remember the name
Oh,
of the.
Brian Wojtko. Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
He and I
Yeah.
went through the same master class.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Train the
He
trainer.
in one of his tweets, he said Kanban is like an ocean, so you can get your foot wet with, and just at the start of like the when water hits and you can go deeper and deeper and deeper and explore that. So
Yeah,
it seems that you are exploring and going deep in the ocean, right? So you're
that's
talking
right.
about the master class. So what's exciting about this Kanban journey that people should be on?
What's exciting about it? Well,
Yeah.
there's just so many things. And, the first thing I noticed just on the FBI project is even just little things were really helpful. Like I didn't have to do the whole thing and every single practice to get benefits. Every little thing that we introduced, added benefits. And I remember that was the theme of, or a big theme of one of David's keynotes. I think it was, I'm trying to remember which conference it was, but he was basically showing some statistics, and he showed that even though a lot of the Kanban implementations were fairly shallow, there was still a lot of benefits that were being gained. And so that I just thought that was really, really neat. And yet there's just so much out there. And so when David's, introduced the Kanban maturity model, um, we could talk about that later about the
Mm.
choice of the words. It's very, it's good and bad, right? You
Yeah.
see the word maturity model, there's some recognition there because of the capability maturity model, and people have heard of maturity models, but people also have a lot of baggage
Right.
and they make a lot of assumptions, unfortunately. But when he came out with that and understood what it was, it totally makes sense, because it's basically taking that ocean and saying, okay, here's where the deep water is, but here's the gentle part that we can come in and that kind of stuff. So he's sort of um, separating it out like that for us.
Right.
That's really neat.
Codify the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So tell us more about Kanban in FBI. We should have called this episode Kanban in FBI or FBI Kanban, something like that. So tell us, in the government, how does that work? Like, how would you how is that? How is it different from other organizations that you guys consulted?
Yes, very different. Well, just in a lot of ways. Just the first of all, it's all about the mission. And actually, so it's bad in that there's a lot of risk aversion,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because, first do no harm, like the show must go on. Like you can't mess things up because bad guys will get away. like we're
Right.
trying to catch bad guys here. So there's a lot of pressure. But there's a flip side to that. It's a really good side, is that when you meet people there, I've never met people so committed to the
Mm-hmm.
mission. I mean, and most of these people, really, let's be honest, they could probably earn a lot more money if they quit than they went to the private sector. They're
Mm-hmm.
there because they care about it and they want to do the right thing. And so, I really always like to say that, because in the newspaper and on TV, we hear so much about government overreach and, bloated government, all this bad stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, what I've seen, and sure, there could be some of that, but the parts that I've seen, I've really count myself lucky
Mm-hmm.
to work with such committed, amazingly committed. They really want to do the right thing. And so the cool thing is, I found that yes, they're very risk averse, but if you can prove benefits, and if you can sort of explain them in a proper way, that they will go for it. So just one quick anecdote. So when I first started on this project, we inherited it from um, you know, another company had had it for 5 years, and we looked and we said, wow, there's a lot of technical debt here, a lot.
Right.
And um, so now part of that, to be fair, part of that is, when there's features that are needed because otherwise, like, crimes will not be solved, you got to do that. There was a little bit of what is that word? There's a Death March. So there
Mm-hmm.
was a famous book called Death March, one of my favorite books, and is basically asked, like, why do people get involved in these horrible projects where they have to work like 12 hours a day? but there
Right.
could be a reason. If you're trying to do something that makes a difference in the world, you're trying to launch a rocket to the moon, people will do stuff like that. And so
Right.
that's the feeling I got, like who we got it from, like they were just coding like hell, like trying to do something to solve these problems that literally life or death. But
Mhm.
anyway, we got this and we're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do with this? So I said, you know what we got to do? We got to explain, make everything visible, show the
Mhm.
FBI everything we're gonna do, and we'll use Kanban to do it.
Right.
And we'll use a visualization, and we'll simply tell them. We say, look, because of this technical debt, we need to spend. And at first I said, we need to spend, what was it? I think it was 60% of our time just remediating technical debt, like
Mhm.
entrenched, horrible technical debt. And we only have 40% of our time, building new features. And they
Right.
said, oh my God, we can't do that. That's, don't even ask that. They'll be insulted and they'll probably, like, I don't know, don't argue with people that carry guns. And I
Right.
said, no, we just explain it. And we say, look, if you drive a car and you never change the oil, we know what's going to happen. If you're the best chef in the world and you're cooking amazing dishes, but you never wash the dishes, eventually you
Right.
get a mountain of dishes. So I used analogies like that. And guess what? They're like, okay, yep, go ahead.
Yeah.
So, and everyone was like, huh? What just happened? So, and what I like is that in the Kanban, in the KMP, KSD course, we talk about acts of leadership and
Mhm.
courage. And
Right.
that's what it is. So
Right.
that's a really cool thing about working with the government, is that just straight shooters, really.
Right. Right. Right.
So,
And yeah, that's I guess one of the simpler ways that Kanban helps with visualization, right? It's when you
yes.
put a mirror, and in one of the Kanban classes that I ran, I was telling them that there is a reason that they put visualize in front of everything else, because that the power that it brings is so immense and so impactful that by just doing visualization, you're bringing so much effect, so much impact to the environment that you're in. Um, uh, so you have been doing lots of from 2010. You have this co-founded the company. You're consulting. You're working with the government. You're embedded in Kanban community. So, is there any turning points in your career that you can share with us? Anything that was a changing, like so impactful in your career that you want to share with us, and myself and the audience learn from that? It could be related to anything that you can think of.
Okay. Well, there's three, and two of them I already told you about.
Okay.
So the first one was just a series of improbable events, by that
Mm-hmm.
somehow we got involved with the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first time was 2003. So it was basically a colleague who went to work for a big federal system integrator, and he saw this program and he said, these guys kind of need some help. And he made the introduction, and and said, oh yeah, you guys, we can help you. And so that was just getting involved with that just changed everything for me. So that was back in 2003, and that I ended up really quick. A long story short, they need to establish a brand new program called missing persons. So until
Mm-hmm.
then, that FBI project had only been, catching bad guys, which is great, very important. But they also needed to be able to, unfortunately, there's mass disasters, or there could be, like, somebody's missing for a long time, and maybe they're a child,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes people are found after like 5 years, and you better be darn sure which family that child,
Right,
right?
right.
So the DNA is really needed for that. Or God forbid they find some bones, and this can bring closure to families. Like, it's really, really important. So, but it needed a completely new kind of DNA analysis, mitochondrial rather than nuclear. And so I joined them, and they said, "Oh, great, thanks, you're here. So we got a challenge for you. We got a task for you, and we want you to help stand up a missing persons program, brand new program. And by the way, we need completely new DNA technology. And by the way, the programming language we were using is obsolete. So we wanted a new programming language. And by the way, we want you to use new designs. And we have a bunch of people here and we want them to train them as well. So,
Right.
so I did use extreme programming in that case.
Right.
And it was successful. That was the first turning point. Second one is really reading agile management, because that's started me on the road towards feature-driven development and then Kanban. And the third one is another interesting story, but it's basically when I applied to become an AKC. So AKC is, back then it was still called KCP, I believe. Right. But it's basically the highest, it's like a Kanban coach, accredited Kanban consultant now, it's what it's called. And to do that, you have to write an essay and you have to go and present your case like a PhD, right? It's like you're defending your PhD, exactly, in front of so I did this, and in hindsight, my choice at the time was probably very unfortunate, because it was at a Kanban summit where almost every single person got food poisoning really badly.
Not to discourage people of not going to the Kanban summit that coming up.
No. So just a crazy coincidence, how it happened, we don't know, but at this hotel we were at, everybody got sick. And so basically I'm making a presentation to people who are trying to not vomit, in front of me. And so imagine how well that had to go. So I did not succeed. I did not succeed. But it was the best thing that could have happened, because what they observed is they said, look, you've introduced Kanban well, and you obviously know it, perfectly, very, very well, but you've only done it at the team level. You've never taken Kanban beyond, teams, or groups of teams. You've never really implemented at the enterprise level. And it was absolutely true. I had not. And I hadn't even really given that much thought to it. And I realized that, as an AKC, one of the things that is expected of an AKC is the ability to come in to organizations large and small and really, really recognizing that Kanban, the organization, can be seen as a network of interdependent services, each of which Kanban, Kanbanified, or however you call it.
Right.
And so that made me go back, and so the last couple of years are, totally changed because of that. I really went on a tour of looking at we call it the diaspora, I guess that's the right word, of all the people who started in the Kanban community as I did, and went on to do related things.
Right.
So, and there's a lot to talk about there, but that's what I've done.
Right. So tell us more the differences or the challenging parts of having Kanban at the organizational level rather than team level, because it seems that from that moment on you experience some of those things.
Absolutely, yes. Well, there are different considerations, right? I mean, there's, when you have, and it's, unfortunately, maybe it's because, Scrum is always applied at the team level, or almost always. And, for that reason, we have all these scaling frameworks, right? Because Scrum alone isn't enough. And I think, unfortunately, Kanban got painted that way. They thought, because people always say, you have Scrum or Kanban. And so they would sort of, in their mind, sort of put it in that box that it's a team level thing, when it never was. It was always, I sometimes use the word fractal, the fractal, that you could have Kanbans of Kanbans, right?
Right.
In a sense, because it's all interconnected. So it really, so for example, portfolio Kanban, right? Looking at the strategy level. If you think about it, sure, that's a Kanban system, like any Kanban system, but it's usually looks very different. and the kind of people that are looking at it are very different, and they have different concerns, right? And
Right.
so they they probably wouldn't use the same metrics,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not going to deep dive into technical stuff. They're sort of expecting, they usually see like balanced scorecard type things,
Mm-hmm.
right? They want like a one-page management. It's another book I read a while ago. So things like that. So they have really different expectations.
Right.
That's at the strategic level. And then between that, where you've got coordination level Kanban.
Mm-hmm.
Klaus calls that, the flight levels calls that flight level 2.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's also different because you're looking at things at a higher, a more coarser grain, right? If you're looking across multiple teams, of course you're not going to see every detail of everything they're working on.
Right.
You
Right.
want to know how they're coordinating, and that gets into really interesting stuff like coordinated dependencies. And maybe I need to reserve some capacity in another team. I might need to reserve something and not even know the details of what I need. I just know that I'm going to need some of their time. So
Right.
you may not even have a user story yet. You may have an idea of a user story. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff that happens at those higher levels.
Right. Right. Right.
Yep.
Yeah, there was one great agile coach that I worked with was telling me that when you're coaching, a good coach doesn't necessarily need to know the content, but the context that you're in. So that seems like the same um, mentality here. Like Kanban can be applied to different content, right? And knowing how to go through simple as static, like going through one Kanban system, next, who probably who you're providing services at the portfolio level with versus flight level 2 or coordination level, right? So
Exactly.
different information. Yeah, yeah.
That's
It's
right.
always good to have a beginner mindset, if I may say. Like everywhere that you go, like have a beginner, like as much as experience you're bringing with your Kanban years, like go there as a beginner mindset and try to understand what they want to bring. So you mentioned about flight levels, and
Mhm.
I know that you are in this space in Kanban community for the longest time, right? And so tell us what other branches or what the analogy that you used. I forgot.
Diaspora.
Diaspora. So
Yes.
what's others that are out there and might be interested for people to know about?
Well, there's quite a number of folks who sort of started like I did in the main,
Right.
trunk of Kanban, and then what they've done is they've chosen to explore different aspects. And so, and I differentiate that, by the way, from people who basically take a glancing look at Kanban and say, I can do better, and try to create something that's competing.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if you have really something better, great, or something different, that's fine. But when it's just like a cheap knockoff version of Kanban, I'm
Right.
not talking about that. And I'm
Right.
not going to name names,
Right.
but we all know who those, are. But I think there's some of the branches of the
Mm-hmm.
Kanban tree, I would call it, right? And
Right.
they're really nice. They're sturdy branches, and they really answer questions. So, for example, I don't know if you could call Kanban maturity model a branch or just a
Mm-hmm.
continuation of the trunk, but
Right.
whatever it is, it's a wonderful development,
Right.
and really differentiating and helping us, when we're learning how to run a marathon, maybe try not to run 30 miles the very first day.
Right.
So that's the way I put it. And then, but I also got in touch with Patrick Stayert
Mm-hmm.
and Discovery Kanban, and he's really taken that to, and we all have Discovery Kanban, we talk about that in all the classes really, but he's really taken it to quite a mature level and talked about there's different considerations there in terms of triage and different practices not necessarily different practices, but some little bit different emphasis, right? Because in discovery, it's about creating options, right? In delivery, it's about delivering options. But there's a lot of implications of that. Like I'm reading a book now on economics, and it talks about supply and demand. And he says, well, everybody knows that. But then he goes on to explain all the ramifications of it, and some of them are stunning. And I'm just sitting here with my mouth open. So that's really what Patrick has done. And then he did it again with Okaloa, and the Flow Lab. So, and I first got to know that at one of the Kanban conferences.
Right.
So that's another one. Flight levels, of course, I mentioned that one. And then the last one I mentioned, I like to mention, is Mike Burrow's Agenda Shift. And with Agenda Shift, it's sort of a change management model, but my understanding is, it could apply to anything, but my understanding is, and I hope he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but is that he's especially interested in C-level, in like management consulting with leadership, and like, how do we determine the correct strategy for our company? Right. And should we go through with this merger or not? Like, these are very, very important questions that affect, many, many people. And, that's a really interesting expansion of Kanban. And, he doesn't use the word Kanban, but I really see it as one of the diaspora out of that, because that's where he came from. Right. And so, and the cool thing about all the things I just mentioned, I see, at least other people may disagree, but I see zero conflict. They work together beautifully. Right. And that's, and we could talk, that's another topic, is the, what's the word that you use? This, fracturing or splintering of the Kanban branches, that, it's a little bit, I guess some of it's inevitable, but sometimes as a Kanban coach, you're like, gosh, I wish all of this could be sort of under a Kanban umbrella. Right. It's, we work with a publicist, and they use a word called brand diffusion. Right. True. So, I always like to say, hey, this is all part of the Kanban universe. Right. It's a great universe. But, that's what happens when you have so many smart people with so many different ideas, right? It's going to happen.
And it's and the community is so open that they bring it into and embrace it, right? Because Mike Burrows that you mentioned, if people are interested, we had the previous podcast is with him, and he's talking about we talked about a clean language that he brings into the Shift Academy, like all those details that we talked about. But for example, a static was mainly the way that he implemented Kanban, and he presented it, and he brought Kanban values. Like was one blog post, right, that he put, and Kanban community embraced it and brought it in, right? So there are lots of it, and I love that you use Kanban universe. Like, this is like a huge universe that we are all using the methods and the tools depending on the situation and the challenge we have on hand.
Hey, we have the MCU. Why not the Kanban universe?
Right. So, is there any? Would there be any failure or attempts that not only related to Kanban, but could be about that you as a consultant, that you mentioned that it seems that it wasn't a failure, you didn't look at it as a failure, the AKC, you learned a lot, but anything as a Kanban coach that you're working with teams that you want to share with our audience?
Well, certainly there's been some interesting things, two I'll mention briefly. So one, the project where David came and spoke, right, was a giant project in New York City, and all the city agencies, NYPD, FDNY, sanitation, all that stuff. And I was using feature-driven development. And so I would, of course, visualize and show senior management what I was doing. And senior management was a SAIC. SAIC, most people haven't really heard of them, but they're as big as Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. They're one of those. They're a huge system integrator. And so I was showing what was going on, and naturally, you organize the work and you let the workers self-organize around it, right? You manage the work and the workers self-organize. So basically, people would have like these sub teams, and then one person would finish over there and go over to this other place. And so, things were dynamic. And I actually had one of the leadership accuse me of obfuscation because of this change, because of these changes. They're like, no, you make a plan and you stick to the plan. Like, not so much. No. So that was uncomfortable. I can tell you that. Very uncomfortable. So, but then another one, we got past it. We got past it and we worked it out. But that was pretty tough. And another one was at the FBI project, where we brought in a mixture. It was very interesting because when we started, about half of the project were people who had been on the project for 15 years, 5, 10, 15 years. And the other half was brand new. So the people that had been there for so long were used to working in a waterfall situation. And so I very soon learned that, they would just say things like, just tell me what to do. I'm fine. I'm good. Just tell me what to do. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. You volunteer and you take the work, you take ownership. And they were not comfortable with that. Like, no, it's okay. I'll do whatever you ask me to do. Just tell me what to do. Why can't you just tell me what to do? Like, oh, it doesn't. So that was tough. And another thing was just trying new things like pair programming, or maybe trying even a different shorter sprint length. I mean, anything, whatever experiment, there was a lot of reluctance. So that's where, Kanban to the rescue. So I learned not to seek unanimity. So I basically said, can we get, much of the team to accept it? And then the rest to say, okay, I'll go along this for 30 days and we'll see if it makes any benefits or not, gives us any benefits. So that's what I learned, is like, if you wait for everyone to agree, sometimes that doesn't work. You get people so entrenched. So you just get them to agree, hey, can we just try it just for a little while? And usually they'll go along with that. So.
Yeah, and 30 days is more than good enough time for them to practice it and learn from it. If there's anything that they need to change. Exactly. For sure. What is the one thing that is currently your major challenge, you may call it, at work or at the consulting that you do?
Oh my goodness. So right now it's big. So and it's I do not know if I will be successful. So right now, the federal government is adopting SAFe very quickly. And they're going to the Scaled Agile framework. And I believe I know why that is. Because if you look at the other Scrum scaling frameworks, like Large Scale Scrum, Nexus, Scrum at Scale, all that stuff, they're really about, how do you do a program, like a program of work that's larger than just a couple Scrum teams. It's how do you organize multiple Scrum teams? And they do that very well. But they're not talking about, how do we transform the enterprise? None of them have that. That's just not the problem they're trying to solve. Right. But SAFe is saying, we are trying to solve this problem. So SAFe is saying everything, we can accommodate the entire enterprise. I'm not saying anything, if they do a good job of that. I have my own opinions on that. but that's the only game in town. So I need something to, and the thing is, a lot of them are really struggling. Gee, newsflash, who could imagine, why would that be? They're really struggling. For a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons is it's bloody complicated. It's really complicated. But they're really the first they've been around for a long time, and they were the first framework that that purported to be agile, that attempted to solve the problem of business. And you could argue, no, Kanban is that one, but we didn't really use those words as much. So part of it was we were just trying to get started and get on teams and everything. So we didn't say from day one, we will come in and transform your business, because of course we wouldn't say that. We're Kanban. Like we would say,
Right.
we're going to incrementally help you. So they were saying that, and you could say, well, that's a load of, what, but, so the question is there something is there some alternative? And I've been searching for that, and I believe I have found it, and that is flight levels. The question is, what is sort of the minimum you can, and I don't get in trouble for saying this, but basically layer on top of Kanban or add to Kanban or whatever you use. It is, an extension of Kanban. I think Klaus would agree with that. It's basically you're adding these additional layers, but essentially what you're doing is you're setting up Kanban systems. You're just setting them up at different flight levels. That's all. And so it's sort of a minimal extra thing. And it's basically, it's drastically less overhead than SAFe. I mean, there's no comparison. So in my opinion, there is a huge need for this. So I'm going to attempt to take on the SAFe juggernaut. And I believe it's my patriotic duty to do so, to help our tax dollars be used more widely. And I think they're looking for it. I think they want it. I think they're searching for it, but they just haven't found anything else. They're like, oh, crap, this is the only game in town. I guess we're going to go with this. I honestly think that is, because I've even seen some memos and things to that effect. Where they're really, in some cases, very, very worried about it. So I really think that we can do that. And I'm struggling a little bit because there's intellectual property, and I want to keep, our relationship with Kanban University is incredibly important, but our relationship with the Flight Level Academy is incredibly important, and I can't do it without both. So I'm hoping that we'll all be friends. That is my hope. And that we can work together, because if we put this stuff together, it's magic. I really think so. I really think it can solve a lot of these problems.
I was in the same situation a while back in a SAFe implementation, and I told myself, as a good Kanban coach, you find opportunities to use Kanban tools there. And we were talking with another AKC a long back, and we were calling it the Kanban Ninja. So we were like Kanban ninjas, that they didn't know that we are doing Kanban stuff, right? But we are improving, and we are the better ones out there doing their SAFe implementation. And then I didn't last there long because of the financial challenges that they had, but I would imagine if I had been there longer, they would have come and asked, like, what are you guys doing that other teams are not able to do? And it would be an opening up a can of worms of, okay, yeah, let's come over here and we can tell you what we are doing. So awesome. Any books or any resources? We talk about a bunch of them: Agile Management, Flight Level, Shift Academy, Kanban Maturity Model. Anything else that you was very inspirational for you? You mentioned that you're reading One Jet March, I believe.
That's something I read a long time ago.
Okay. Any one book or one resource that you recommend for people that are interested in Kanban, or in general in Agile consultation?
In general, yes. Well, I do read. I go through books very quickly, and but one I was looking and saying, well, what's sort of a recent book that I read and that I would really recommend? And one of them, Seat at the Table is wonderful. But one of them I really, really like, I just recently read. It's called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And it is fantastic. I would recommend it to everyone. It's basically talking about business strategy, what business strategy is and what business strategy is not. And trying to make more money is not a business strategy. But and you say, well, why would I care about that? I'm not working with C-level executives. I'm not trying to, but honestly, the book is so well written and so compelling that I would recommend it to anyone, and especially a coach, because a lot of you may not be deciding strategy at the enterprise level, but there's a
Right.
strategic component for sure, and it's just it's a brilliant book. Yeah.
Right. Right. What was the stats for it? It was like if you ask the organization that are large, like more than 1,000 people, the 93% or 95% of people, they don't know what the strategy is that the company set for them. So that's
Exactly.
and see, when you mentioned that, my mind went to like maybe we should bring that like act of leadership at every level. Like your strategy should be a forefront of every level too, right? So it's not about your role or position that you're in, but like if you know how to strategize, you would be very successful at what you do.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, and you have to give a shout out to Klaus for that as well.
Right.
I think Flight Levels explicitly talks about how to do that.
Right.
Yep. So Flight Level 3.
Right.
Great
Nice.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. We again, for the people that want to, like, they can look up Klaus Leopold as well, but we had a session with him pre-pandemic, so you can find it on our YouTube channel as well and on our website.
Nice.
So talking about the flight levels and what doesn't businesses agility has nothing to do with teams. That was an amazing talk. Yeah,
That's right. That's right. So the only one, so if you've spoken to Patrick Stayard, if you haven't, you
right.
need to speak.
Sure.
Him,
I'm going to put on my list to bring on the show as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So Craig, we're almost to the end of the show. Is there anything that you want to share that we didn't share yet? Anything that you want to talk about that we didn't cover? This is it's your flow.
I think we already touched on it, but just one of the things for me is I've been on this incredible journey of discovery and learning about all these offshoots and related discipline, related branches of Kanban. And it's just been amazing and wonderful, really, to learn about this, these really exciting practices, disciplines, thinking models, if you will.
Right.
And I wish there was more, some way to sort of have a big umbrella and have them all work together, and maybe even not formally, but some joint kind of, in the military, they talk about joint exercises, right? Where the
Right.
Army and the Navy, or the Navy and the Air Force will work together and have an exercise. Those are good things. Those are really good things. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have an Army and a Navy. You're still going to have those, but you work together, and I think that would be so amazing, because each one of these is so valuable, and you put them together, it's quite something. So I would love to see that. I'm a eternal optimist.
Yeah. The half glass full, I guess.
Oh, one more quick
Sure.
thing. I've been also had the privilege and pleasure of working with some of the major Kanban tools that are out there. And I have to say, we're living in a golden age of tools. The tools have come so far. And I still remember when I first started teaching Kanban system design, people would say, "Oh, this stuff is amazing. Where can I do it online?" And I sort of hang my head and be like, well, can't really do everything. And so, but now I can say, yep, we got it. And we don't just have one or two, we have a whole range.
Right.
And it's just awesome. But I've been working with them. And right now, we talked about all those different branches and different things.
Right.
So what I've done is distilled some of the things that, in my opinion, will be needed to fully support all of those things in Kanban tools. And I'm actively working with some of the tool vendors to say, how can we get some of those in there?
Right.
And it's happening. So it's super exciting.
And would you be able to name names, or you want to keep it?
Well, Well, two that I've been working with quite a bit is Kanban Eyes and Kanban Zone,
Right.
and they both have slightly different emphases. Kanban Zone is especially active in non-IT. It's really interesting stuff. And one of the things that's happening in the industry, I believe is going to happen, and it's just starting to happen, is Miro and Mural tools,
Right. Yeah.
basically the online whiteboard thing. I believe that functionality is going to merge with Kanban tools, and you're going to end up with something incredible, because you're going to have all the freedom of like a real whiteboard, but with the discipline of the metrics and the everything, all the great things that you get with a Kanban tool. Imagine that. Like, that will be amazing. And it's certainly happening with the Kanban tools. I'm starting to see elements of that. One other thing, I'm also working with Becky Watson, who has spent 3 years building a Jira plugin. Amazing job. So basically, she's said, I have customers that use Jira, and the Kanban support, Scrum support is fine, Kanban support not so much. So darn it, I'm going to build a plugin and make it better. And by God, that's exactly what she did, and it's remarkable. It's called CAT. So also working with her on that. Amazing stuff.
Right. So we are going to get you pass me the links to these amazing tools so that we can put it on the podcast note for sure. And would you, if people want to connect with you and learn from you or ask questions from you, how would they be able to get in touch with you?
Sure. Of course, our website, aerialpartners.com, and Ariel, like the mermaid, ARIEL. Of course, by email or my LinkedIn, Craeg Strong. I'm the only Craeg or one of the few Craigs with CRAEG. So that way I'm easy to find. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Craeg, for accepting and coming on the show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and hopefully to see you again on the show sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.